Hi guys, thanks for joining today. Thanks for making the time and joining us. Today's webinar is an interesting topic and something that has consistently come up in client meetings that we've been having over the last year or two. We hope you're going to get some real good value from it. Some of you might already know Annie from her digital project management days, which is when we started speaking. I'll let her tell her story and introduce herself properly. But yeah, Annie's been helping C-suite leaders and execs with managing their ADHD diagnosis, and I feel like this session is going to be really valuable for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So there's a live chat feature on the side of the screen that you can drop questions in whenever you have them, and we'll allocate 15-20 minutes at the end of the chat to run through a few questions. But yeah, whenever they come to your mind, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end. So yeah, Annie, I'll pass over to you, and you run with it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to take you all through this talk around maximising potential for leaders with ADHD today. But before I get started, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we all live and work on throughout Australia. For me, that is the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. I'm here in Maribyrnong in West Melbourne. And fun fact, if you didn't know, Maribyrnong is an anglicised way of saying I can hear a ringtail possum. So a bit about me. Oh, I might need some help getting to the next slide there. There we go. So a bit about me. I work with neurodivergent leaders to help them manage their stress in the workplace and free their creative minds from that corporate chaos. I was an executive director of a customer experience agency, running large departments and leading really large technology programs of work when I found out that I was autistic and ADHD. I later retrained as an ADHD life coach and also a positive intelligence coach. So before we get started, let's accommodate each other. I have ADHD. You guys probably have ADHD. I'm also autistic, and I had a stroke last year. So my brain doesn't work the same way as other people, or even the same as it did 18 months ago. So there might be times where it's not as easy for me to get out the words in the way that I want to get them out. Part of me accommodating myself is by being open with you about these things so that when those do happen in the moment, I actually feel less embarrassment than I might if I was trying to pretend that I wasn't struggling with those challenges. I also encourage you to fidget and move. If you have a favorite fidget toy, I have a whole selection of fidget toys. Find one that you've got, and maybe even if just do something that's going to make that ADHD feel a little bit calmer while you're sitting down and focusing. Also, give yourself permission to be present. If you're a leader, you probably have 1,000 plates that you are juggling, but you have given yourself time to attend this webinar today. For me, if I'm trying to be present, I have put my computer on focus mode. I have turned my iPhone upside down. I've shut down my emails. I've shut down Slack and Teams, but do what feels right for you so that you can feel present. And also, if for whatever reason you feel, oh my God, I've got too much and I need to go, give yourself permission to do that. That's okay. You'll get a recording later, so don't worry. It's all good. So I'm going to make an assumption that if you've joined this webinar, you likely have been diagnosed with ADHD, or you suspect that you might have ADHD. Now, a bit of a fun fact, quote unquote fun fact, is that 1 in 10 people have ADHD. Now, if you have Googled these stats in the past, or to be honest, even recently, you might have seen different stats. I think even on the ADHD Australia website, it says 1 in 20 Australians have ADHD, but there have been some recent studies that have shown those numbers have significantly increased. So there's been a big rise in those stats since the pandemic for a number of reasons. So a lot of people have been joining social media platforms like TikTok and getting an algorithm that's designed especially for them. Women and girls are starting to see how ADHD presents differently to boys. And there's also increased education of GPs and psychologists into what ADHD looks like, especially what it looks like when you are not a hyperactive 5-year-old boy. So while boys and men are more likely to be diagnosed than women, that doesn't mean that it is more likely for a man to have ADHD. It is roughly the same. It's just a little bit harder for us to get diagnosed. We get diagnosed with things like anxiety and depression. So for leaders with ADHD have unique strengths: creativity, innovation, ability to hyperfocus for long periods of time on tasks of interest, high energy, enthusiasm, quick thinking, being adaptable, risk-taking and having an entrepreneurial spirit, out-of-the-box problem solving, having resilience, perseverance, empathy, high emotional intelligence, ability to multitask effectively, strong crisis management skills, spontaneity, flexibility, passion and drive for their work, ability to see big picture connections, thriving under pressure and deadlines, and strong intuition and gut instincts. That's a long list. These strengths can make ADHD leaders particularly effective in dynamic, creative, and high pressure environments. But ADHD affects a set of skills called the executive functions, which are a series of cognitive processes. These challenges can affect work, relationships, and daily functioning. So common challenges of ADHD include difficulty focusing, poor time management, disorganization, impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, forgetfulness, procrastination, poor planning skills, difficulty with task completion, low frustration tolerance, sleep issues, difficulty following instructions, poor working memory, restlessness or hyperactivity, trouble with prioritization, and what I see really commonly in my clients is stress and burnout. My process of creating this webinar, I struggled with a really, really good portion of these executive functions. I had everything planned and prioritized, and then I got to 2 weeks before the webinar and I literally could not do it anymore. I ended up with some extreme procrastination. And even though I'm an ADHD coach and I know that these things happen, it's still really frustrating. They happen because that's the challenges that we live with as an ADHDer. So when it comes to leadership, the reality is it's a really hard job, even if you don't have ADHD. It's a thankless job most of the time. There's a lot of admin. There's a lot of back-to-back meetings. Nothing is ever really done. The projects that you work on are bigger and longer and harder than the projects that you've previously worked on. But it's extra hard when you have these executive functioning challenges. But a lot of people get promoted and they tend to be really good at their previous role as an individual contributor. But most of the work that you do as a leader isn't what you used to do as an individual contributor. When I was first promoted into a leadership role, I'm certain that it was because I was good at my individual contributor role. And people did listen to me, which was helpful, but that in itself didn't make me a good leader. Leadership is a practice to be honed and a skill to be defined as an individual. You also get to decide what sort of leader you want to be, and that was a revolutionary idea to me. So you can see that there are many styles of leadership, and a lot of these styles are connected to those strengths that I mentioned earlier. So an affiliative leader is someone who is naturally high in empathy. An autocratic leader might be someone who has really good instincts and knows how to get things done. A pace-setting leader is probably someone who has a really, really strong hyperfocus. A transformational leader is likely someone who is naturally a really great innovative systems thinker. A situational leader is someone who is great under pressure and works well in a crisis and can pivot on a dime. The challenge I see in a lot of leaders is that they tend to slip into or favor one of those styles without pausing and stepping back to think, do I actually want to work this way? You're so busy in your day-to-day, juggling those 1,000 plates, and also struggling with ADHD, trying not to forget things, trying not to be late to meetings, that you often don't have time to pause, reflect, and define what style you want to embody. And to be really clear on who you want to be known as a leader, and what you want to be known for. When I was first promoted into a leadership role, I was quite transactional and autocratic. I'm autistic as well as ADHD, and rules and black and white thinking and driving results are what come most natural to me. But there came a time where I realized that while that was my natural leadership style at the time, that actually wasn't the type of leader that I wanted to be. Those were my most natural styles and strengths, but they actually didn't align to my values and ethics. But I hadn't paused to reflect and redefine, and I was unaware of the conflict between that natural style that I had, my ambition, and my values. I now tend to be more of a situational leader, where most of the time I operate in a coaching style, because obviously I'm a coach. But when I'm working with organizations, I operate in a transformation style. I'm now going to go through each of these styles, and I'm going to touch on where ADHD might impact that style of leadership and some strategies to avoid those impacts. So first up, we have a democratic leader. That's someone who's going to reach consensus through group participation. Where I see ADHD leaders operating in this is that they tend to be quite familiar with feeling like they're on the outside. So they might spend a lot of time trying to get everyone to consensus because that's what feels good to them and that's what they would want their leader to do for them. But they can get stuck in decision paralysis. And that can result in really slow decision making and slow task completion. Learn what decision paralysis feels like in your body so you can identify when you're in it. Because a lot of the time we don't realize that we're in it. What does it feel like? Do you have a sinking pit in the bottom of your stomach? Do your feet feel like they're stuck in mud? And when you're stuck in decision paralysis, think about the 80-20 rule. Identify the 20% that needs to be perfect, where you need to have all the data and you need that consensus, and the 80% where good enough is good enough. Almost all of my clients are verbal processors, so find someone, a brainstorm partner, that you can verbally process those tough decisions to get to clear next steps without having to go through that extreme consensus and group participation. And face your fear of making tough decisions when it's the most strategic thing to do or it's urgently needed. An autocratic leader is someone who uses individual control over those decisions and little input from those group members. They tend to feel out of control from overwhelm or executive dysfunction and use that sense of control with those decisions and ways of working to try to reduce that sensation. Move from expecting people to fail to course correcting on exception. Trust your people to do the work and be clear about when your specific unique brain is going to add the most value. Provide really clear outcomes that you expect rather than the way that you think it should be done. And know that people are not going to do things in the exact way that you are, and that's okay. A bureaucratic leader is someone who uses a clear chain of command with established rules and procedures. And black and white thinking is pretty common with ADHDers, There's also a lot of autistic ADHDers who are undiagnosed, because when you have both, they can often kind of almost cross the other one out. It becomes less obvious that you have either. But if you are autistic, you probably enjoy rules and procedures, because that is a way to reduce personal anxiety, but it leaves other people feeling like they might be micromanaged. Know that those rules can be broken, and identify when you're using rules to reduce your own anxiety or to increase that sense of control, or when a rule is actually needed because there's a law or a regulation or a process that actually needs to be followed. Notice when you're feeling resistance to someone doing something differently to those established rules and procedures, and also when they're doing it differently to how you would do it. Pause, do a little mindfulness exercise, which I will take you through later. And if you're allergic to the word mindfulness, hold up. It might actually be something that you like. But check in with yourself about what's behind that resistance. And then experiment with flexibility about how your staff work and reframing what it means for something to be done right. A transactional leader relies on a system of rewards and punishment to motivate their employees. Frustration and emotional dysregulation makes it harder to focus on rewarding positive behaviors, and easier to focus on penalizing negative outcomes. Remember that your staff are individual humans with their own strengths, challenges, and experiences. They're not resources. They're not robotic resources. So moving from carrots and sticks to understanding what motivates them, and learn how that emotional dysregulation feels in your body, and using some sort of techniques to help regulate your nervous system so that you can reduce this method of penalizing these negative outcomes. If you're feeling frustrated in a meeting, pause and take 3 deep breaths before replying. I find that really, really helpful for me personally. A pace setter leader is someone who sets really high standards for performance. And they probably have a hyperfocus that they can really activate and work really long hours in a way that demonstrates unachievable standards, unnecessary pressure, and creates burnout in the team. The standards and pace that you set should be sustainable for both yourself and your team over the long term. Explain to your team how your hyperfocus works, and that it might be different to how they work, and be clear that it is not what you expect of them. Don't contact your staff out of hours, and schedule your emails to be sent during regular working hours. So be the mirror, demonstrate to them what sort of ways of working are acceptable. Because if you're demonstrating lots of late nights, lots of emails out of hours, they think that that's the way to work. I also recommend booking in sufficient breaks for yourself across the year in advance, so that your hyperfocus doesn't get activated for a really long period of time, and you don't have space to actually pause and kind of calm down. A laissez-faire leader is really hands-off and allows group members to make the decisions. But what I see with ADHD leaders is when they're communicating this delegation that they're giving, it can often be ADHDers will see point A, they'll see point Z, and they forget to communicate all of the letters in the alphabet to get there, and often assume that everyone else can see what they can see. But ADHD brains work differently, and I very much would suspect that other people cannot see those connections that you can see. And it's really easy to omit key information when you're delegating, which can result in poor outcomes for that delegation. And if you're getting poor outcomes, you're going to be delegating less and less. And that's going to mean that you're going to feel a sense of overwork from doing that. So level up your briefing, create a lot of clarity and expectations when you are delegating, set your North Stars, be really clear on outcomes and results, and any specific deliverables, timeframes, ways of working, so that you can give that delegation to other people and step away with a level of comfort. You can use something like the Covey matrix or the Eisenhower matrix to get really clear on what's important versus urgent. And it's really helpful to be clear with your staff that if they don't know, if they're unclear, to ask, because a lot of people, they won't ask if they haven't been given permission. An affiliative leader is someone who creates harmony and builds emotional bonds. So they're really keen to be liked by everyone and sees everyone as friends, and might find it quite hard to make tough decisions that could hurt people's feelings. Because ADHDers, we receive a lot of negative feedback and feel a lot of hurt as we grow, and so we try to avoid that. But make peace with the fact that not everyone's going to like you, all the decisions that you believe to be right as a leader. You're in this role because your instincts are trusted. Identify what important actions and decisions you're resisting doing. So with exercise that I'll take you through in a little bit, ask yourself afterwards, what am I resisting? And write those things down, and then brainstorm how you would address them and what support you might need in that. So servant leaders lead from behind and grow the organization through employee engagement. What I see quite a lot is a hyper-focus on the team and a selflessness without demonstrating their strategic thinking and decisiveness, which perhaps senior leaders might be unaware of the value that you bring. Leading from behind does not mean that you are always in the shadows. Identify your critical stakeholders to build relationships with and influence. Ask yourself, if there were no barriers in the way, what would I change to support the team in performing better? And turn that North Star into an actionable plan and document it. Turn those informal conversations into active, strategic persuasion and negotiation. A coaching leader is someone who develops for future progress. You might find yourself hyper-focusing on developing people because it's something that you enjoy, instead of focusing on business results. But as a leader, you need to operate on two speeds. You need to focus on the future, what you need for next year, but you also need to focus on the job that needs to be done for next week. So balance optimizing your talent with risk reduction, profitability, and customer engagement. A charismatic leader is someone who persuades and motivates through passion and vision. I see a lot of ADHD leaders in this leadership style. But they're also someone who might get really excited about new ideas, get bored quickly. They might not have the right team or the energy to follow through those ideas to completion. If this is you, acknowledge that you actually might get excited at the start of a project, and then hire the right people to help you implement your visionary ideas. This leadership style needs doers to support them. I mean, all leadership styles do, but this one in particular. If you are finding a project hard to start, or you're feeling like you're getting bored at the tail end of a project, you can use that as an opportunity to delegate and skill up your direct reports and bring them into the fold. Because if you are a charismatic leader, I guarantee they are waiting to jump at this chance to work with you closely. Transformation leaders are ones that approach a change through a change in individuals and social systems. But ADHDers are known for a 0 to 100 mindset that can make the change seem quite big and scary. We can also jump from change to change because we get excited, and we might not take people along the journey, which can result in some stress and change fatigue. So focus on making the change less overwhelming and actionable. I like to focus on a 1% change every day rather than the 100% change that you're trying to focus on in the next year. Create narratives about that journey and be methodical with regular communication and two-way conversations about that change. And lastly, we've got a situational leader. These are ones who can change their style to suit the team and challenge. Very, very quick to pivot, great in an emergency, but the team might experience whiplash if there's too many changing focuses and it's unclear and there's changing ways of working, because they might not know how to apply those to BAU situations, because ADHDers are using instinct in this situational style to know which way to pivot to. So just know that frequent pivots can destabilize the team, and explain the reason for your changing focuses and those styles to your direct reports. Because if they understand the why, then they'll understand how they can apply that to their day-to-day. And so then you can scale those great instincts that you have as an ADHD leader by getting your team to help you document processes that would be helpful for others to know, because they might not share the same instincts as you, especially if they are reporting to you. They are not as senior as you and they do not have that experience. All right, so I said at the start, this is about maximizing potential. And I want to be clear on what I mean by maximizing potential. I don't think of potential in the capitalist, do more tasks, be more successful, do all the things. I think of it more in the physics meaning of potential. So how do you build up your potential energy to be able to get your unique ADHD strengths flowing in a way that makes you feel good, rather than hitting your head against an executive functioning brick wall and feeling terrible about it? Because when you're feeling terrible about it, your ADHD strengths aren't being maximized. So how do you get that energy in? How do you create that potential energy so that you can then get into flow, and you also have the time to get your creative juices flowing and get those connections and that bouncing around of that unique ADHD brain going? So neurotypicals tend to work at a fairly consistent pace over time. They tend to innately know how to maximize their energy so that they still have some left over in the tank for their personal life. This is quite different to ADHDers. So ADHDers work in a very different way. We have two modes of thinking: scattered thought or hyperfocus. Now, if we're getting technical about this, this is the transition from what's called the default mode network in your brain to the task positive network. So task positive is when you have a task, you're action focused, you've got your steps, you're executing that task. Default mode network is where you are staring out the window, daydreaming, letting the ideas bounce, 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 bounce. We oscillate between those two modes in a really different way to neurotypicals. So for me, my hyperfocus is like leaving an iPhone on a car dashboard in a really hot day. It drains my battery really fast. And what I see a lot of my clients come to me with is they believe that their highly activated hyperfocus is the mode that they're meant to be in 100% of the time. But when you do that 100% of the time, you burn out, which is really, really not fun. And we don't give ourselves permission to oscillate between, okay, full activation to, okay, we're just going to let ideas are going to bounce around. That's when the brainstorming happens, the innovation happens, the strategic thinking. And our brains need this different way of working to be our unique ADHD selves. So once upon a time, I was in a really demanding new leadership role, and I was feeling stressed out and also that really familiar sensation of heading towards burnout. In a one-on-one with my boss, I had a bit of rant about it, and I was talking about how busy and stressed I was. And he said this to me: Annie, you need to get used to never getting to the bottom of your inbox and never finishing your to-do list. I was like, what? Really? I can do that? Oh, I didn't realize that I needed permission to start thinking that way. Because as an individual contributor, you'll be praised for doing all the work, getting all the work done. You've got all the tasks, check, 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 you're doing that. But as a leader, You get praise for doing the right work, not all the work, the right work. Prioritization is your best friend because you simply cannot do it all as a leader. So there's this really great book that has very recently come out called Unlearning Shame by Devon Price. This is the single most consistent theme that I see with my clients: shame, a lot of internalized shame. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from the book. So Devon Price says, systemic shame is a belief system that teaches that individual bad behavior is the root of all problems. Then, in talking about the impact of colonization on our mindsets and communities and how that changes us as individuals, Puritans believed that independence was the mark of being a good person and that needing support was a sign of depravity. Shame is one of the worst ways to facilitate change. It freezes and overwhelms us. It floods us with dread and makes it difficult for us to think rationally about long-term solutions. Systemic shame prioritizes the values of perfectionism, individualism, consumerism, wealth, and personal responsibility. Shame reduces a person's trust in their ability to get things done. Shame also leads people to think that they don't deserve to treat their bodies with kindness and consideration. Radical self-acceptance is one of the most powerful actions that you can take as a leader with ADHD, to learn how to acknowledge what sensations you're feeling in your mind and your body, and then to treat yourself with kindness and consideration. It allows you to stop trying to fit your brain's square peg into the round hole that you've been taught that you need to try and use. It allows you to forgive yourself when you make a mistake, much like how I opened this talk about the accommodations I'm giving myself. It allows you to pause and breathe. It allows you to rest. It gives you the peace to get to know your brain, how it works, and to build the tools that you need to get the most out of it. The people I work with are so incredibly creative and see things in ways that others don't. And that is a gift, not something to fight against or try to shave the edges off to conform. Be uniquely you. A lot of the challenges ADHD leaders struggle with stem from nervous system and emotional dysregulation and not pausing or resting enough. We're go, go, go. We're in that, trying to hit that task activation network with our extreme hyperfocus 100% of the time. And it overwhelms our nervous systems and dysregulates our emotional systems. Mindfulness is something that's really important for neurodivergent people. Not to clear the mind, because if you have ADHD, you've probably tried and you know that's pretty impossible. But it's about slowing down, breathing, listening to your body, focusing on one small thing at a time, and focusing on your bodily sensations. There's lots of different ways that you can do mindfulness. A lot of my ADHD clients, they do mindfulness in different ways. So it could be that they knit or they paint, where you're focusing on one small thing, a stitch at a time or a brush stroke at a time. They might enjoy walking or going to the gym or dancing. There's different ways to be mindful. But what I'm going to take you through is a technique from a 7-week group training program that I run for neurodivergent professionals to help them learn how to do just that, to calm down their nervous system. So if you feel allergic to mindfulness as an ADHDer, I just ask that you humor me for a few minutes and just give it a go. All right. So I don't know where you're sitting. You possibly are at a desk. Hopefully it's somewhere slightly private. But if it feels comfortable for you, I invite you to close your eyes. Sit with a neutral spine and Get your feet on the floor. And start with a few nice deep breaths. And if it feels comfortable for you, take your hand and place it on your stomach so that you can feel your body moving as you take that breath in and out. And now just relax your breathing down to its natural rhythm. And start by feeling your seat on your chair. So feel the contact points of where your body touches your seat. It could be on the chair, it could be at the lower back, it could be on your upper back. And just notice the sensations of connecting with that chair. And notice your feet on the floor. And try and find each of your toes. So spread out those toes and try and find 10 individual toes and just connect your feet and your toes with the ground. And keep doing that breathing. Now take 2 fingers, a finger and a thumb, and rub them with such gentle attention that you can feel the fingertip ridges on each finger. And now take all the fingers on one hand and connect them with the fingers and palm of the other hand. And again, with such gentle attention that you can feel those fingertip ridges and notice all that sensation of touch. You might notice the heat in between your palms. You might notice how dry or damp your fingers are. And now focus on the sounds in your environment, the ambient sounds that you can hear. And try and focus on the sounds that are the furthest away. And now focus on the sounds that are the closest to you. And if you haven't already heard the sound of your own breathing, hear the sound of your own breathing. And notice the temperature as you breathe on your nostrils. You might notice a different temperature as you breathe in versus when you breathe out. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I don't know about you, but I feel calmer than I did before I ran through that. There is something in that process about closing down your senses to focus on just one individual sense or thing at a time that I find very, very helpful. So that is a thing called PQ reps, which one PQ rep is just 10 seconds. So that could just be 3 deep breaths, which is why I said 3 deep breaths if you're in a stressful situation at work. ADHDers, frequently we tend to breathe from our necks rather than from our diaphragm. And so if you can start to push that breath down and then get more oxygen, our nervous system start to regulate a bit better. So this is from a Harvard white paper on leadership. This is for leaders generally, not for ADHD leaders. I would say it is doubly as important for leaders with ADHD, but it just takes a bit more focused effort and persistence to get things working in a way that works for you and for your brain. How you slow down, how you minimize those distractions and find the space to focus and reflect is probably going to look really different to other leaders with or without ADHD. Everyone's brains are so unique that what works for one person might not work for another. So I encourage you to focus on experimentation and reflection on how you work and what your brain and body needs to thrive at work. So in summary, get to know your brain. Learning how your brain works is powerful. It can help you to better direct it in the way that you want it, rather than trying to fight against it and getting it to do something that it doesn't want to do, because that's when we start to activate shame. Now, I do cognitive assessments with my clients to help get deep into this, because often ADHDers, they get a diagnosis, they might get medication, and then they still actually have the same tools and awareness as what they had before that diagnosis. Now, if you are interested, there is a federal employee assistance fund through the Job Access Network that if you get approved, you get access to $1,610 for specialist mental health services, which can be coaching in a 12-month period. Now, if you have a formal diagnosis, which is what is needed to get access for that, you can apply online, and the approval process is extremely easy and fast, and people tend to get approved within a couple of days. Find your dopamine. We struggle with dopamine, and for most of my clients, that starts with medication. But you also want to surround yourself with the right people who activate that dopamine. I love brainstorming. I love having a good, intense conversation with some great concept or a framework with someone who's going to get my dopamine flowing. Movement is also really, really helpful for ADHDers, even something as simple as just going for a walk, because we lack blood flow in the prefrontal cortex, and any sort of movement is going to help activate that. Also be aware that you are going to get more dopamine from thinking about doing a task rather than completing the task. So that means we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate the small wins, and physical celebration and mental celebrations are both helpful. I love a physical celebration. So like physically pat yourself on the back. You might feel silly for doing it, but these little things are scientifically proven to generate more dopamine for ourselves. Also experiment with that celebration. You might want to rip up a task card, shred it, burn it, have a 5-minute rave, or get a really nice pen and paper to cross it off. Something that sensorily is going to feel good. And stop using shame as a motivator and instead focus on positive motivators. Reframe what good looks like. It's not about being perfect every day. It's not about being in a hyper-focus 100% of the time. It's not about being perfect as soon as you try something for the first time. Focus on that 1%. You are different to leaders who don't have ADHD, so stop trying to be like them. Focus on persistence over consistence. It is really hard to be consistent as an ADHDer, you know that, but if you are persistent, you can get to that 1%. Practice self-compassion by speaking to yourself how you would want your best friend to speak to you. because the more that you speak to yourself that way, the more you believe it. It takes practice, and every little bit helps. And I'm a big fan of a mantra. And lastly, slow down and reflect, because leaders must slow down, minimize distractions, and have the time and space to focus and reflect, and dedicate time and workspace for developing yourself as a leader, choosing your leadership style, and strategic planning. Now, I know I've covered a lot of content. So I actually have a download of that leadership styles framework with the strategies in a lot more detail. If you take your QR code, you can scan that. So you can download that and have it for later.
Cool, thanks for that, Annie. That was great. I hope everyone got some good value of that. I think there's quite a few questions in the chat as well, so we'll get to them now. One sec. Venny, you there to pop them up? What would you say, Annie? I've got a question myself. What would you say are the kind of first steps if you feel like you may have ADHD but are unsure?
Yep. Well, I guess if you're going to go down the diagnosis process, the first step is to go to your GP and get a referral. Now, getting into a psychiatrist can be difficult because there's a lot of backlogs at the moment. And it is going to require a little bit of executive functioning to get on a wait list, but I would recommend getting onto a wait list because some of them are short. Like there are some people who might have capacity within a few weeks or even a month or two. But there are others that might have a year-long wait. So I actually forgot my first referral. I went back to my doctor a year later and said, "Oh, I think I've got ADHD." And she's like, "Yeah, I already gave you a referral for that." So getting onto that wait list is going to be the first thing. You've got two people who can diagnose. You've got clinical psychs and psychiatrists. Unfortunately, clinical psychs can't give you medication. So if you go to a clinical psych, get a diagnosis, decide you want to get medication, you have to go to another psychiatrist and do another assessment. I wouldn't recommend just go straight to a psychiatrist to start off with.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What was the kind of the thing that brought you to actually go and get tested?
It was definitely TikTok. I actually had no idea that I had ADHD. I was diagnosed autistic first, which, to be honest, made a lot of sense to me. It kind of framed all of my struggles in a way that made sense. But I actually was completely unaware that I had ADHD. I'd been diagnosed with anxiety for a long time. And I thought that's what I had, but I basically had internalized hyperactivity. So instead of running around and being really hyper, like I'm sluggish, I'm a couch potato, I'm a sloth. So I didn't think that that's what ADHD looked like. But my hyperactivity is in my mind. So my ideas and my thoughts go bounce, 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 especially when I'm activated. So that kind of mindfulness thing that I went through, I do that every day, because otherwise it's like, it sounds silly, but it's like my electrons vibrate. They go up and they vibrate really fast. And then I start to feel really panicked and I have to bring it down. And I thought that was anxiety, but that's actually ADHD for me.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Right, we've got a few questions. Here we go, then. Yeah, thank you. When you said you do cognitive assessments with clients, can you elaborate? I'm assuming that is different to the cognitive assessments that were normally done by a psych.
So this is around thinking styles and ADHD styles. So this is something that possibly a psych may do. I personally have not known any that have done one. So the one that I do comes from a book which is called Thriving with Adult ADHD. There's an assessment in that book. And it basically helps you understand what parts of your executive functioning you struggle with the most. So you may struggle with starting a task versus completing a task, or you may struggle with emotional dysregulation. And it just kind of helps to put some framing around that. So I'm going to assume that, yes, it is probably different, but it is specific to ADHD.
Okay, cool. We've got another one, Ben. I think there's a few more. Here's one. Can you guide yourself through that process, or do you need someone to talk you through it?
Great question. I think you can guide yourself. So that's a part of the positive intelligence coaching that I mentioned before. It actually comes with an app, and so I use the app because I can choose: do I want to do a 2-minute, a 5-minute, or a 12-minute? There's a lot more different types than what I ran you through. I personally get more value out of having someone else run me through it, because otherwise I get distracted. But you can do it, and it's one of those things where it's kind of easy to talk through, but it's hard to like build that practice. So even just like simple breathing, like if you can just like if you start to feel yourself getting activated and just go like just that is the first start. But that was a long way of saying you can do either, but I find having someone guide me through it is helpful.
Okay, cool. Got another one here. How have you found your relationship with the role of medication through your journey? Sam's noticed that it's easy to think it's what will allow me to better fit into a neurotypical pace of work. However, hang on, I can't put that all in. However, I'm suspecting that this could be a bit of a trap, and that it maybe should just assist and not fix.
So, great question. I think the thing with medication, firstly, it is the first line of support, and it is in the ADHD guidelines for treatment guidelines in Australia. So for medication, for about 70 to 80%, it's life-changing, amazing. Like it solves a lot of problems, or it helps get things going. For 20 to 30% of people, they actually have so many side effects that they can't take it. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people, so I can't take it every day. And yes, I think to an extent, it kind of does do that for some people, but not for everyone. So as I mentioned, this process of me going through this webinar, I actually don't take medication because of the side effects. I have taken it. I was in a very, very bad ADHD burnout where I had such low dopamine, I could not get off the couch. And so that helped me kind of like get my body moving and doing the things that I needed to make me feel good. But in going through this webinar, I actually had to take my medication for a couple of days because I was just so stuck in that decision paralysis that I couldn't get moving. So there are moments for it. Everyone has their own experience with medication, but the large proportion of my clients, it is the first and main thing that helps them. And then coaching gives them the extra skills, because it isn't a silver bullet, but it is a really good one.
Cool. And there's just a couple of questions. I think Sally missed the name of the modes that you mentioned.
Yes. Okay. So there is the task positive network and the default mode network. So task positive is when you're action focused, you're doing things, you're basically hyper focusing to an extent. And the default mode network is where you're kind of like relaxed and you're not focused on something.
Okay, cool. And what was the name of the grant you mentioned as well?
It is called the EAF Fund, Employee Assistance Fund. So there is a federal fund called the Job Access Network, which helps people with disabilities and mental health conditions in the workplace. And they are a great service here in Australia.
Yeah, it's good to know. I think that's it for questions, unless anyone else has any others they want to drop in quickly. But yeah, thanks a lot for that, Annie. That was really great. And if anyone's keen to continue the conversation with Annie, just scan the QR code on the screen, and we'll share Annie's business details on our on our newsletter this month. And if you want to sign up to any more Creative Native webinars, you can do so on the Contrast platform that you're watching this on now. But yeah, thanks for joining, and thanks so much, Annie, for sharing your expertise and insights. I'm sure people got some really good value out of that. Yeah, see you all again soon.
Thanks so much for having me speak today.